Hi everybody. So this video is just to review the leadership autobiography assignment. So as you know, this assignment outline is available on Blackboard through the assignments section. And I'd invite you to go through after watching this video and take a closer look at some of the areas. I want to do a brief overview of the outline, and then you'll be able to go back and look at more specific elements to the assignment. But this is just to review what you're supposed to be doing over the course of the assignment. So, what are the basics of the assignment? First of all, this is worth 10% of your final mark and is a total of 40 marks. So the assignment's broken down into 4 sections, 3 content sections, and then the final section relates to writing mechanics and APA. So the goal of this assignment is to explore your leadership journey to this point. We all have various experiences and influences, people who have developed or who have had an impact on our development as individuals, and then in some cases as leaders as well. And so I want to take time through this assignment to explore some of those people and experiences. For this assignment, you must have access to the course textbook. That's the Student Leadership Challenge by James Kouzes and Barry Posner. If you don't have that, please make sure you get that either hard copy or ebook before you start working on this assignment, because it will be critical to being successful. This assignment is also going to ask you to use APA formatting and citation guidelines. So that's another thing to make sure that you're comfortable with. You can use Cites and Sources as a resource for that. The other option is to use the Georgian College Library Writing and Citing Guide, which is available through the library website. And there's also a link available to that in our assignment section on our Blackboard course page, so you can look at that as well. In total, your assignment is going to be roughly 3 to 4 pages. Some people may be a little bit over that depending on how much they write, but that's sort of what I'm looking for as a base minimum, 3 to 4 pages. So this assignment is broken up into 3 separate parts. The first part is the Leadership Practices Inventory, which is a personal assessment that's located on the last 2 pages of the assignment document. So there's an assessment page, and then there's also a scoring page where you'll complete that assessment. The LPI connects to the course textbook and is basically going to evaluate how well or not well you conform to the 5 practices outlined in the textbook. There's also a reflection aspect to this where you'll reflect on your highest and lowest score. The second part of the assignment is related to your best leadership influence. So somebody in your life, a person who's had an impact on your personal development or your development as a leader. The last section relates to a personal best leadership experience. So something that you've been a part of, whether that's on a sports team, at school, at work, where you've been able to show leadership for other people. So let's go through and look at these a little bit more closely. The first section obviously relating to the leadership practices inventory and the reflection. So again, like I said, the personal assessment is related to the 5 practices from the course textbook. So we're looking at those 5 practices are model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. The 5 main sections of the course text. And again, like I said, that assessment is available on the final 2 pages of the assignment outline. So again, we're discussing through this assessment how well you conform or don't conform to the 5 practices. So you'll basically get a ranked score for each of the 5 practices. And in this section, I'm asking you to discuss your highest and lowest score. So when you go to the assessment, you're going to answer a bunch of responses on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being almost never that statement applies to you, or almost always that statement applies to you, which would be 10. Once you've assessed, once you've figured out what your highest score or your highest practice and your lowest score or your lowest practice are, I'm then going to get you reflect on those. So in those reflections for each, you'll be discussing and describing personal experiences that might help to illustrate your highest and lowest scores. And then in addition to that, you're also going to use theory from the textbook to help illustrate how those connections, how those practices connect to your personal life and the practices themselves. So for this section, I'd encourage you to just use pages 8 to 15. We're going to get more specific in other sections, but in this section, you're welcome to just use that short page range, 8 to 15, in the introduction to the textbook. As you include information from the text, you should also be citing that information with proper in-text citations, and those citations must include the page numbers. I want to know what specific pages you're getting information from. So this first section of the assignment should be about 1 page in length, and you're welcome to include more if you need that, or if it would be helpful to better explain your ideas. People have found that 1.5 pages is usually good enough, but if you think you can get it done in just the 1 page, that's a 1 page minimum, so keep that in mind. The other thing I'd ask for this section is that in your reflection on your highest and lowest score, please separate the highest score with a heading and then another heading before you start discussing your lowest scores. That just helps organize your ideas. It's easier for me to follow. So the second section of the assignment, best leadership influence. So in this section, you're going to choose someone who's had an impact on your life or an influence on your personal development or your development as a leader. So in this section, you're going to describe specific actions that person took or things that you observed that had an impact or an influence on you and your development as an individual or a leader. Once you discuss those different actions and observations, you're going to connect those to specific elements from one of the 5 practices. So you'll be able to choose just one, so you might choose model the way, inspire a shared vision, or the other 3, one of the other 3. Okay. In this section, as you make those connections, you're going to include in-text citations and page numbers for where you got that specific information from. The connections that you make to the textbook really should support the discussion about the influence. So you want to try and pair pieces of information from the textbook to the examples that you've provided about your influence. That just helps create a stronger argument, I suppose you could say, overall, and makes the connections more clear as to how they connect to the practice. Again, in this section, it should be about 1 page in length, but if you need more or you feel it would be helpful to include a little more than that, you are welcome to do so. The last section is our personal best leadership experience. And so this section is very similar to the last one, but in this section you're choosing a leadership experience that you've had in your life. And so that might be an example from school where you're working on a group project, an example from sports where you were the captain on your team, or you took a leadership example or a leadership role within the locker room to help out your teammates, or you took just generally a leadership role on the team. You're involved in community work, somewhere where you're helping out in the community, or even some kind of community service club. So those are different examples that you could use. When you're describing your that experience, be specific in outlining and showing how you showed leadership through that experience. Just like in the last section, you're going to use connections, you're going to connect those actions and behaviors that you had in your experience to specific elements from one of the practices. So again, you're going to choose one practice, either model the way, inspire, shared vision, etc., to help make those connections between your personal experiences and the text. And again, this section should be about 1 page in length, with the addendum that if you need more or you think it would be helpful, you're welcome to do that. The last section, again, is APA and writing mechanics. This section's out of 10 marks. Obviously, the first part, writing mechanics, includes things like spelling, grammar, sentence structure, and clarity of ideas. A note on this section that's really important: if your writing is not clear enough, it may affect your mark in other sections of the assignment. So even if you haven't edited your paper or you haven't gone back and made those connections, even if you think your ideas are clear but they're not worded properly, or your sentence structure is strange and your ideas aren't necessarily clear enough, that can have an impact on this section as well as whatever section that information came from. APA, we're talking about the formatting of the document, including an APA formatted cover page and similarly an APA reference list. You should include in this assignment a reference entry for the textbook, and that's just common practice to include that. You'll be doing so on most of the larger assignments you do in the course. You're also expected to include citations for the specific information from the text that you include, and that citation should include the name of the authors of the text, the year that the textbook was published, and then a really important piece is the page numbers for the information that you used. Okay, so that's really critical. And again, you can use cites and sources for that, or there is a link to the Georgian Library website, APA Writing and Citing Guide, in our Blackboard course shell in the assignment section. One important note for questions 2 and 3. In question 1, I've said that it's okay to use pages 8 to 15. That's because that's a more general question. For questions 2 and 3, I want you to avoid using that introductory section. The information in that section is still just too general as you're getting more specific in questions 2 and 3. And so in order to sort of better navigate the textbook and find information that's useful, use the headings to find that more in-depth information about the practices within the text. So if you identify Model the Way, there are many headings throughout the text, or that section, that relate to behaviors you might see leaders using to help model the way. The other thing is, as you know, there are 2 commitments associated with each practice. The other thing you should avoid doing is just using the names of the commitments to show how they connect to the practice. Again, those are still very general, and there's more specific and more in-depth connection that you can make using the other headings for each commitment. So that's just important to keep in mind. Those headings really illustrate behavior and actions that leaders might take that relate more specifically to each practice or more in-depth to each practice. So those are the things that I'm looking for. If you have questions or you want clarification on that point specifically, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, because that is an important point not only for this assignment, but also larger assignments as we move forward. So I want to wish you good luck with this assignment. This is our first larger assignment, and this, just keep in mind that if you have questions, please get in touch with me as early as possible so that I can get responses to you and so you have time to implement those that feedback or those the answers to those questions in time for the assignment deadline. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Anyways, have a great week, and we will talk to you very soon.